Welcome back to the deep dive.
Good to be talking about this.
Yeah, because today we're tackling a really packed time frame. Basically, August 31st, 2025, bleeding right into September 1st.
It was one of those periods where, wow, a lot was happening all at once. Almost hard to keep track.
Totally. And that's kind of our mission here, isn't it? To try and, cut through all that noise.
Yeah, pull out the key threads.
Exactly, extract the important stuff, and maybe connect some dots between stories that, on the surface, look pretty separate.
Give you folks a bit of a shortcut to getting up to speed.
We'll be hitting on, well, some heated policy fights here in the U.S., major international crises unfolding.
And, like you mentioned before we started, even some space weather.
Right. Something for everyone. We've pulled info from, well, all over. Reuters, AP, the usual suspects.
Plus more specialized outlets. You mentioned NOAA and some international reporting, too.
So, a good mix. Let's just jump in, maybe start stateside. August 31st felt like a real day of confrontation, legally and politically.
It really did.
Yeah.
And, the thing that jumps out almost immediately, looking just at the U.S. stories,
What's that?
it's this persistent tension, this push and pull
Between
the federal government trying to assert control and then resistance or checks coming from, the courts or state governments or local officials.
Yeah.
It's a pattern.
Okay. Yeah, I see that. And that was really front and center with this immigration story, wasn't it?
Absolutely.
On Sunday, August 31st, a federal judge in D.C., Judge Sparkle Suknanen, she issued this emergency order.
Right. Stopping the government from deporting unaccompanied kids from Guatemala.
And the reporting suggests some of these kids were literally on planes or, waiting on the tarmac in Texas.
Yeah, it was incredibly last minute, a dramatic intervention.
So this pause, it lasts at least 2 weeks, and the kids go back to shelters.
That's the order. And it really throws a spotlight on those existing legal protections for unaccompanied minors.
You mean the Trafficking Victims Protection Reauthorization Act, that kind of thing?
Exactly. That law generally requires individual screening, due process, before someone, especially a child traveling alone, can be removed.
So this ruling basically enforces that process.
In this instance, yes. It's a check on potentially moving too fast, too broadly.
And the reactions were, well, pretty much what you'd expect.
Oh, yeah. Completely split. Immigrant rights groups saw it as crucial, a necessary check on executive power.
While the administration's allies were saying these were just family reunifications requested by Guatemala even.
Right, framing it very differently. So this case, it's not just about these specific children.
No.
It could really set a precedent or at least test the limits for how these large-scale, rapid removals can happen, especially with minors involved.
So that follow-up hearing will be really important.
Definitely one to watch. Thousands of kids potentially affected down the line.
Okay, another area testing federal power voting rights.
Right, August 31st again.
President Trump announces on social media he intends to issue an executive order.
For voter ID for every single vote. And restricting mail-in voting.
Yeah, only for the gravely ill and deployed military. It ramps up his earlier calls for paper ballots, hand counts.
But the immediate question, the huge elephant in the room, is federalism.
How can a federal order dictate how states run their elections?
Exactly, because fundamentally, elections in the U.S. are state-run operations. They manage the mechanics, the voter rolls, the polling places.
So this idea of a sweeping federal mandate.
It bumps right up against that structure. Legal experts jumped on that immediately, questioning, the feasibility, the legality.
Interdicting court challenges almost instantly.
Absolutely. Supporters frame it as boosting election integrity, obviously.
While critics are sounding the alarm about voter suppression, administrative chaos.
Especially thinking about the timeline for the 2026 midterms. Implementing something like this nationwide, it would be a massive, likely chaotic undertaking.
So another major legal and political fight brewing there.
Definitely. Over the fundamental question of who controls how Americans vote.
And that federal versus local tension, it flared up again in Chicago.
Yeah, this was bubbling up too. Same day, August 31st.
Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem signals they're boosting ICE operations there, maybe other places too.
Which prompted a really strong reaction from Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker.
He accused the White House of trying to mess with the 2026 elections, maybe even stop them.
And then the mayor of Chicago drew a line in the sand, ordering city police not to help federal agents or any National Guard troops involved.
So a direct standoff.
Pretty much. And this isn't entirely new, is it? This dynamic of federal deployments in cities?
No, we've seen variations before. The administration often links it to crime rates, immigration.
Right, justifying it on those grounds.
Yeah.
But it always resurrects these deep debates about public safety versus civil liberties and that core federal-state power balance.
Who's really in charge of policing a city?
Exactly. And how much cooperation can the feds expect or demand from local police when there's disagreement?
Business groups, civil rights groups, they're already worried about the fallout, right? Economic disruption, social tension.
Sure. While the White House perspective is likely that tougher enforcement is just necessary. So this Chicago situation will be a real test case.
Okay, sticking with the U.S. for a moment longer, trade policy also got a jolt.
Yeah, this was around August 30th, 31st, a court ruling on the Trump tariffs.
A divided U.S. appeals court found most of them unlawful.
That's right. Big implications, potentially huge refund exposure for the government.
But they paused the ruling.
Yeah, they stayed the mandate until mid-October, giving the administration time to appeal to the Supreme Court. So the tariffs actually remain in effect for now.
Okay, so no immediate change on the ground for businesses.
Not immediately. And the U.S. Trade Representative, Jameson Greer, came out saying negotiations are still moving forward, downplaying the immediate impact.
But the uncertainty must be significant.
Oh, definitely. Markets, analysts, they were kind of split. Some think limited impact near term, others warning about pricing and revenue hits if those refunds eventually do get ordered.
It could definitely complicate future trade talks.
And congressional dynamics, too.
Yeah.
It adds another layer of uncertainty.
All right, one more U.S. item before we go global. Public broadcasting. NPR, PBS.
Yeah, reports on the 31st painted a pretty bleak picture. Funding cuts triggering what their leaders are calling an existential crisis.
Layoffs, program cancellations looming as the stopgap funding runs out.
And it's important to remember what's at stake here. Public broadcasting fills gaps.
Especially in rural areas, news deserts, and things like children's programming that commercial outlets often don't prioritize.
Right. It relies on this mix of federal, state, private money. So deep cuts really hit hard.
Media advocates are warning about less local reporting, less educational content.
Well, those supporting the cuts argue against taxpayer subsidies in today's streaming world.
So the future depends on finding bridge funding, maybe big philanthropic campaigns.
Or potentially, a smaller, maybe patchier public media system. It's a significant cultural and informational resource under pressure.
And finally, on the domestic front, a really sudden development at the CDC.
Very abrupt. August 31st again, the director of the CDC was fired by the administration.
And immediately, Health Secretary RFK Jr. announced plans for sweeping changes to vaccine policies.
Which, predictably, caused a stir. Allies framed it as needed transparency.
But public health officials pushed back hard.
Immediately. Protests, concerns raised about increasing vaccine hesitancy, the politicization of health science. The timing and manner were stark.
This isn't just about one person's job, is it?
Not at all. Experts are warning this kind of move risks seriously undermining public trust in federal health agencies like the CDC.
Which could impact vaccination rates across the board.
And potentially weaken our ability to respond to future outbreaks. When public health advice gets tangled up in politics, it has real consequences for everyone's well-being.
Okay, wow. That's a lot just within the U.S. Let's shift gears now and look globally, because August 31st and September 1st were just as packed internationally.
No kidding. And the Gaza conflict obviously remained a major focus, drawing intense scrutiny.
Starting with something from the academic world, but with potentially wider ripples.
Yeah, on September 1st, the International Association of Genocide Scholars announced something significant.
What was that?
After deliberations, 86% of their voting members approved a resolution. It stated that Israel's actions in Gaza meet the legal criteria for genocide.
Wow. Okay, that's a strong statement from that group. It's not legally binding, though.
No, it carries no formal legal weight in itself, but it adds considerable academic and moral weight to claims that some UN officials and NGOs have already been making.
So it could influence the conversation? Maybe show up in legal arguments?
Very possibly.
Yeah.
You could see it referenced in the ongoing ICJ proceedings, for instance. Israel, for its part, flatly rejected it, called it disgraceful, maintained their actions are lawful self-defense against Hamas.
And meanwhile, on the ground, the fighting didn't let up.
No. Reports between Aug 31st and Sep 1st had Israeli tanks moving deeper into Gaza City neighborhoods.
More evacuation orders for residents?
Yes. New leaflets dropped. Gaza health officials reported more civilian casualties from airstrikes. Israel maintained it was hitting military targets.
And the humanitarian situation?
Grim. Aid groups warning about rising casualties, malnutrition becoming more severe. International mediators apparently saw very little hope for an immediate ceasefire at that point.
Amidst all that, there was news about hostages, too,
Yes, the IDF confirmed on the 31st that they had recovered and identified the bodies of 2 hostages from Gaza.
including someone from the Nova Music Festival.
Right, which brings this, awful mix of some closure, but also renewed frustration and pain for the families still waiting. Amplifies calls for access, diplomacy.
And the conflict's ripple effects continued to spread, impacting U.S. policy, too.
Definitely. The New York Times reported on August 31st about a major shift in U.S. visa policy.
What happened there?
The U.S. apparently suspended visa approvals for almost everyone holding a Palestinian Authority passport. Not just Gaza residents anymore, but much broader.
Wow, that's sweeping. Who does that affect?
Potentially, medical patients needing treatment in the U.S., students accepted to universities, business travelers, a wide range.
What's the justification?
U.S. officials framed it as a security-driven pause, needing time for enhanced vetting procedures. But rights groups immediately called it collective punishment.
And you can imagine the reaction from universities, hospitals.
Yeah, warnings about disrupted programs, delayed medical care. It's bound to strain U.S. diplomacy in the region, too, and likely face legal challenges here at home.
And adding another layer to the diplomatic picture, France recognized a Palestinian state.
That happened in late August, yes. President Macron made the announcement, a significant move by a major European power.
Which sparked strong reactions, I assume.
Oh, yeah. Israel condemned it. Some U.S. officials warned it could destabilize things. Palestinian leaders naturally welcomed it as overdue international support, adds complexity to the whole situation.
Okay, moving from Gaza to another humanitarian crisis zone, Yemen.
Right. On August 31st, there was a concerning incident in Sana'a.
Oh, what occurred?
Houthi forces raided UN offices there. They seized property and detained at least 11 UN personnel, both in Sana'a and Hodeidah.
And this came shortly after an Israeli strike in
These were
Sana'a.
days after, yeah. A strike that reportedly killed some senior Houthi figures.
So possibly retaliation?
It certainly raises that concern. The timing is suggestive. The UN Secretary General strongly condemned the detentions, of course.
And the impact on aid. Yemen's already in such dire straits.
Exactly. This makes an incredibly dangerous environment for aid workers even worse. It risks choking off vital humanitarian relief further. And it really heightens fears of this cycle of violence spreading, linking strikes related to Gaza to Houthi actions.
A dangerous feedback loop.
Very much so.
All right, let's shift focus to Ukraine. There was an update on that assassination attempt.
Yes, the shooting of Andrei Parubi in Lviv on August 30th. He's a former parliamentary speaker, prominent pro-Western figure.
President Zelensky announced an arrest.
On August 31st, yes. They arrested a suspect. Details were scarce: motive, accomplices, still unclear. But authorities hinted it was a carefully planned operation.
Even with an arrest, an event like that must send shockwaves.
Absolutely. It reverberates through Ukrainian politics, security services.
Yeah.
You'd expect heightened security for officials, maybe renewed focus on rooting out infiltration risks, even far from the actual front lines.
Some suggested a possible Russian connection later.
That speculation arose, yeah. It's a reminder that the threats Ukraine faces aren't just on the battlefield.
And briefly, another humanitarian crisis spots Sudan.
Yes. On August 31st, the UN's World Food Program issued another grave warning. Starvation worsening there.
Because the fighting is blocking aid.
Pretty much. Ongoing fighting between government forces and armed groups continues to prevent crucial aid deliveries. Sudan has such a long, tragic history of conflict and instability.
And millions are at risk.
Millions. Aid agencies are struggling, appealing for action, but progress is painfully slow. It's a devastating, protracted crisis.
Okay, so beyond the immediate political and conflict zones, August 31st also brought news on the environment, tech, the economy, starting with a natural disaster.
Well, in Afghanistan, a magnitude 6.0 earthquake hit the eastern part of the country.
Reports mention scores killed and injured.
Yes, and significant damage to homes, clinics. Rescue efforts were hampered by aftershocks, landslides, people forced to sleep outside.
And this region is already vulnerable.
Extremely. History of earthquakes, ongoing humanitarian crises. And what makes this even worse?
Aid situation.
Exactly. Humanitarian officials explicitly warned that severe funding cuts, partly linked to reductions in U.S. aid, were directly hindering the response.
How so?
Clinics closed. Critical equipment like helicopters grounded because there's no money for fuel or maintenance. It's a stark example of how geopolitical decisions and budget cuts far away have immediate life-or-death consequences for ordinary people in a disaster zone.
Afghanistan's fragility really laid bare again.
Tragically, yes.
Okay, now from the earth to the sky. Space weather.
Yeah, kind of fascinating. Late on August 31st, NOAA's Space Weather Prediction Center, the SWPC, issued a watch
A watch for what?
for a geomagnetic storm. They predicted G2, which is moderate, potentially G3, strong, levels hitting late September 1st into the 2nd.
And this is caused by...
A coronal mass ejection, or CME, basically a huge burst of plasma and magnetic field from the sun hurled towards Earth.
And these storms can actually affect things down here.
Oh, yeah. We're in solar cycle 25 now, which is more active. These storms can disrupt power grids, high-frequency radio communication, GPS signals, even satellites in orbit.
But they also cause the aurora.
That's the beautiful side effect. Widespread auroras, potentially visible much further south than usual. NOAA even put out a guide for the public and for critical infrastructure folks.
So mostly manageable, but operators need to be ready.
Exactly. Power grid operators, airlines using HF radio, GPS-dependent systems, they monitor these alerts closely to take precautions and mitigate any potential risks. It's a reminder of our connection to the sun in ways we don't always think about.
Okay, back to Earth economics. China's manufacturing data.
Not good news there, reported on August 31st. The official PMI, is the Purchasing Managers Index, showed factory activity contracted again.
For the 5th month in a row.
Yes, and at a steep pace. It points to ongoing weakness.
Driven by the property sector problems.
That's a big part of it, yeah. Plus, soft consumer confidence domestically and weaker demand for exports. It puts more pressure on Chinese producers.
And likely means more government stimulus coming.
That's the expectation. More policy easing, probably aimed at boosting household spending this time. Global markets watch this closely, of course.
Because China's economy impacts everyone.
Absolutely. Commodity prices, global supply chains, and related to China and tech supply chains.
The U.S. chip restrictions.
Right. Reuters reported on the 31st that the U.S. tightened the screws a bit more on Samsung and SK Hynix manufacturing advanced chips in China.
Making it harder for them.
By adjusting the licensing rules and the exceptions or carve-outs they had. It makes it more complicated to service existing equipment or bring in new upgrades.
So extending that U.S. tech control strategy deeper.
Pretty much. It puts more pressure on those big South Korean chip makers to diversify their manufacturing footprint, move more capacity out of China.
Accelerating that split in the global chip supply.
Yeah, what some call bifurcation. Investors are watching where that capital spending might shift maybe more to Korea itself, the U.S., or other third countries.
Okay, and then shifting to travel here in the U.S. over that holiday weekend, it wasn't smooth sailing.
Not at all. Record travel numbers met some really dangerous weather.
Flash floods, rip currents.
Yeah, hitting major hubs and popular beaches. Reports of hundreds of swimmers needing rescue in California and the Southern Plains. Airports, highways shut down in places.
After a whole summer of extreme weather events, too.
Right. It really underscores the need for better climate resilience, investing in infrastructure that can handle these more frequent extremes.
And tragically, there was also a mid-air collision.
Yes, over Colorado. Two small planes collided during one of the busiest travel weekends.
Were there survivors?
Reports indicated immediate rescue efforts saved lives, thankfully. But it obviously triggers major investigations.
Questions about flight patterns, air traffic control, airport congestion.
All of that. Especially with small aircraft, ensuring safety in crowded airspace is a constant challenge.
And one more piece related to technology's impact on us personally. AI chatbots and mental health.
Yeah, an interesting, maybe concerning report surfaced on August 31st. Researchers described something they called AI psychosis.
AI psychosis, what does that mean?
It describes cases where people who had really extended, intense interactions with AI chatbots experienced increased anxiety, confusion, even emotional distress linked to those interactions.
As these chatbots become more common in our lives.
Exactly. The researchers stressed the need for, designing these things safely, maybe regulating their use, especially as they get more sophisticated and integrated.
Raises big questions about technology's role in our mental well-being.
For sure. Should AI support human mental health, or could it detract? And the really tricky question, should it ever replace human mental health care? A lot to unpack there.
And finally, a very different kind of story, Burning Man.
Yeah, a real shocker out of the Nevada desert. A death occurred on site around August 31st.
And it was ruled a possible homicide.
That's what law enforcement indicated. launching a full investigation. Obviously casts a shadow over the whole event, known for its art and counterculture vibe.
Must have raised questions about safety at such a large, unconventional gathering.
Definitely. Organizers expressed shock, recommitted to safety. But you see different opinions, some blaming oversight, others seeing it as a tragic, isolated incident. Could impact how large festivals like that are managed or perceived going forward.
Wow. Okay, that is an incredible amount of ground we've covered from just 48 hours. So let's try and connect some of these threads.
Yeah, when you step back from the individual headlines, what's really striking, I think, is how interconnected so much of this is.
How so?
Well, we saw that recurring theme domestically, right? That tension between federal power and local control, immigration, voting, the Chicago deployments. It's the same fundamental argument playing out in the different arenas.
Okay, yeah.
And then globally, you see how a conflict like Gaza doesn't stay contained. It ripples outwards, affecting U.S. visa policy, sparking reactions from France, potentially fueling instability in Yemen.
Even impacting aid workers' safety there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then you layer on top the economic pressures from China's slowdown affecting global markets, the U.S. tech restrictions reshaping supply chains.
Plus, environmental shocks like the Afghan earthquake, made worse by funding issues and even the potential disruption from a solar storm.
Right. It paints a picture of a world where things are deeply linked. Geopolitics, technology, economics, even natural events, they all bump up against each other, often simultaneously.
So it raises that question for all of us, doesn't it? How do you navigate all this?
Yeah, how do we as individuals process a world where a decision in Washington, or a conflict far away, or a burst of energy from the sun can actually have tangible impacts on our communities, our lives, our sense of security?
From the immediate horror of starvation in Sudan to the long-term strategic game over microchips, it's a lot to absorb from just one day.
It really highlights how interconnected and maybe how volatile things feel right now.
So we have definitely taken a deep dive into an incredibly dense period, August 31st, September 1st, 2025. From that judge's order hitting planes on the tarmac to the earthquake in Afghanistan, the space weather alert, it's just clear the world doesn't stop.
Never does. Always brings this complex mix of challenges, progress, setbacks.
And thinking about all these stories, the speed, the sometimes surprising links between them, maybe the biggest takeaway isn't just what happened.
What then?
Maybe it's about how quickly the ground can shift under our feet, how established norms, legal norms, political norms, even environmental expectations are constantly being tested, stretched, redefined.
That's a powerful thought. So many fundamental questions being challenged at once.
Exactly. Questions about power, about safety, about national identity, about the role of technology. It really leaves you wondering, doesn't it?
Wondering what comes next.
Yeah. What new rules, what new boundaries, what new understandings will eventually emerge from this constant churning global conversation? Makes you think.